Ash rained from the copper sky as Lieutenant Ryan Cade stalked down the black basalt ridgeline, his boots crunching over brittle shards of volcanic glass. The wind howled like a dying engine across the Dravo's 7 training compound, carrying with it the sulfurous stink of the nearby magma vents. Cade ignored it. The new recruits were assembled in the scorched field below, their exoframes gleaming under the planetary dusk like beetles trying to mimic soldiers. He knew better. Most of them wouldn't last the month. He stopped at the overlook, folding his arms, letting his gaze cut through the smoke haze. The field was a familiar graveyard of ego, burn pits, craters, broken drone husks, and scrubbed bloodstains long since fused into the soil. Another class of hopefuls ready to prove they were more than the galaxies discarded. Down below, 2 squads were locked in a mock skirmish. Pulse rifles set to stun, drone support offline, instincts on full display. Cade's eyes tracked movement, not tactics, not strategy, just the raw animal impulses of the unseasoned. His comm crackled in his ear. Alpha squads burning out fast, came the voice of Sergeant Homer, perched in the East Tower. Solis is rushing like his back in a vidreel again. Cade grunted. Me-ex Solis, bright-eyed, genetically tuned for strength, and dumb as a spent charge. Solis thought war was a stage and he was the lead. That kind of thinking got entire units buried on worlds no one remembered. He watched as Solis led a reckless charge, trying to flank Bravo from the open. Predictable. A stun round clipped his leg and sent him face-first into the dirt. Cade didn't flinch. Below, the other recruits hesitated, then broke formation. Only one kept moving, not fast, not flashy. Just steady. A woman in a standard-issue suit, armor dulled from overuse. No augmentations. No flare. Her helmet visor mirrored the flames from a nearby impact pit as she moved from cover to cover, methodical as a metronome. Cade narrowed his eyes. She didn't return fire. She didn't need to. Her path cut between enemy fire like she'd seen it all before. "Who's that?" he asked, tapping his comm. "Canna. Transfer from the civilian Militera programs," Homer replied. "She's not impressive. No exomods. No combat record worth noting. She's moving like she's bored. You want her pulled?" Cade didn't answer. He watched her finish the drill, not with triumph, but with surgical disinterest. She stood over the downed cadets, checked her HUD, then walked away from the exercise before the instructors even called an end. Back at the briefing dome that night, Cade stood by the wide glass viewport, watching plasma storms roll across the obsidian horizon. Behind him, the recruits lounged in the lower pit, their laughter bouncing off the walls. Me-ex Solis sat front and center, bruised but undeterred, running his mouth to whoever would listen. "I'm telling you, that civvy chick's a liability." She froze half the op. She made it to the target zone, Harvin countered, leaning back on his elbows. "By sheer dumb luck. I had flank control, if I hadn't taken that hit." "You got shot trying to play hero, again," someone muttered. Solis's voice dropped a shade. "What's a 30-something failed tech doing here anyway? Looks like she wandered in from a mechanic's bay. Probably still thinks pulse triggers need coaxing." Laughter rippled again, cruel and effortless. Canna sat on her own, back to the wall, cleaning her gear without expression. She didn't rise to it. She hadn't said a word since orientation. Cade stepped into the room, and silence fell like a guillotine. He let it stretch. "You all think this is the part where I scold you. Wrong." His boots echoed as he circled the pit. "You don't like someone? Prove you're better. Outrun them. Outshoot them. Outlast them. Because when the Arctic come through that breach, when your oxygen's low, your HUD's cracked, and your buddy's bleeding out, you'll pray for someone who doesn't flinch." He stopped in front of Canna. She looked up, finally. Cade's eyes dropped to the faint mark on her wrist, barely visible under the edge of her glove. A coiled viper biting its own tail. Simple. Clean. Too clean. His pulse slowed. He'd seen that mark once. Not on a cadet. Not in training. He'd seen it carved into the titanium wall of a warlord's bunker on Hesperon VI, just above 30 dead mercs and a message scrawled in their blood. *, we were here. You were lucky. *. Cade turned away without comment. The next morning brought the colonel. He arrived in a dust-choked shuttle, flanked by 2 grim-faced officers and silence that moved like a shadow ahead of him. Colonel Joran Reddick didn't wear rank on his chest anymore. Didn't need to. His presence alone straightened backs and froze half-smirks before they could form. Cade met him on the landing pad, saluting without a word. They walked the perimeter in slow circles, discussing rotations, attrition, upcoming war games. Then the colonel changed the subject. "She's here. I noticed. You saw the mark?" "I did. She's not supposed to exist." "I figured." They stopped beside a collapsed outpost tower, long since gutted in a drone test. Reddick gazed across the field, his eyes glassy with memory. She was part of Omega Black. Unit designation, Viper 6. Asset class infiltration and kill confirmed over 50. Last seen during the Umbra Purge. "We lost contact in orbit." "She die?" "We thought so. Turns out, we were wrong." Cade nodded slowly. "So what's she doing here?" "I don't know." The colonel's voice was tired in a way that went deeper than bone. "But if she's wearing the mark again, it means something. She isn't trying to stand out. The others are pushing her." "Of course they are." Reddick turned, gaze sharp again. "The Vipers were never flashy. You saw her movements. She doesn't fight. She calculates." "That's worse." He handed Cade a sealed data chip. "Keep this off the systems. Surveillance footage from the West Ridge. One of the drones went dark last night. Alien? Unknown. Whatever it was, she was there. Camera died 5 seconds after she looked at it." They stood in silence as the wind screamed around them. "You want me to pull her?" Cade asked. Reddick shook his head. "No. I want you to watch her." That night, Cade sat in his private quarters, visor glowing with decrypted playback. The footage was grainy, corrupted by electromagnetic interference, but not before a few frames stood out. A humanoid silhouette crouched beside a disabled security drone, fingers moving fast over its circuits. The camera zoomed slightly, then froze. The figure's head turned directly toward the lens. It was Canna. Her face, unshielded, bore no expression. But her eyes, sharp, unreadable, locked onto the lens like she'd known it was watching. Then the screen went black. Cade leaned back, rubbing a hand over his scarred jaw. He didn't like mysteries. Mysteries got people killed. In the bunkhouse, Mir Solis paced restlessly, chewing over his earlier embarrassment. He'd never been the best, but he'd been top of his rotation. Until today. Until she walked through like it was child's play. He tapped his wrist console, pulling up her file. Blank data. Prior experience, Class C mechanical operations, Luna 2 outpost. No combat credentials. No certifications. No medals. He knew fake files when he saw one. "Harvin," he called to his bunkmate. "You ever wonder why someone would wipe a record clean just to show up and act like a ghost?" Harvin rolled over. "Maybe she's running. Or hiding. Or watching," Miek said, narrowing his eyes. A single thought sank into his mind like a shard of cold steel. She didn't look like a killer. Which, of course, was the point. Outside, the volcanic horizon trembled faintly. And somewhere in the shadows of Dravos 7, Canna sat alone, wrist exposed to the wind, the faded mark of the Viper gleaming under the flicker of the training lights. The night was colder than usual on Dravos 7. Wind swept through the training fields in jagged gusts, stirring dust across the sensor towers and silencing the nocturnal chitter of maintenance drones. Lieutenant Cade stood outside the command dome, jacket half-zipped, arms folded. He wasn't sleeping much these days. Never did when something didn't fit. Canna didn't fit. He'd reviewed the data chip 3 times. The footage was corrupted beyond repair, but those few seconds before it went black were burned into his mind. Her face in the lens. That stillness. Not fear. Not surprise. Just recognition, like she had expected the camera and let it see her. Inside the dome, the recruits had been ordered to quarters, but Solis hadn't taken the hint. Cade watched the kid in the reflection of the glass wall, pacing across the lower deck like a predator too young to know it wasn't dangerous. Harvin sat nearby, pretending not to care but watching all the same. They were up to something. Cade could feel it in the rhythm of their movement, in the way Solis clenched and unclenched his fists. At 0400, an unauthorized breach warning blinked across the dome's inner console. Cade responded in seconds. He found Solis and Harvin near the auxiliary drone bay, the maintenance hatch pried open. A diagnostic console was active. Holographic files hovered in midair, training logs, facility schematics, and buried beneath layers of security, the red-capped seal of a restricted combat operation file. It was labeled Umbra Purge, V6. You want to explain why you're pulling classified files from the command archive? Cade's voice was low and sharp. Harvin jumped. Solis didn't. We wanted to know what she is, he said. We know she's not a recruit. Cade walked forward slowly, letting the tension build. So your solution is to hack into a secure database and crack red-level clearance tags. She's not who she says she is. Her records are fake. We're not the only ones seeing it. And what would you have done with the information? Pass it around the barracks? Turn it into another story for your next squad meeting? Solis didn't respond. Cade reached through the projected data, isolating the Umbra Purge file. This operation took place 6 years ago. Unauthorized combat actions beyond the Outer Rim. 0 survivors. The mission was sealed by the Joint Command Tribunal. You said survivors were 0, Harvin said. Then who's V6? That's what no one wants answered, Cade muttered. He terminated the feed and shut the console. This stays between us. You're on latrine duty for 2 weeks, and if I so much as see you near another command node, you'll be reassigned to cryotransport loading in the asteroid belt. Understood? Solis hesitated, then nodded. Cade held his gaze until the younger man looked away. Back in his quarters, Cade called up the old killzone overlays from Hesperin VI. The mark had shown up there first, burned into stone with a plasma blade, right beside a mass grave. Command had dismissed it as a terrorist signature. He hadn't believed it then. He was starting to believe it now. When morning drills began, the atmosphere was brittle. Cadets went through the motions without speaking. Rumors had started to spread, thin and sharp like wires beneath skin. Canna moved through the course like usual, quiet, efficient, always just enough to pass. Never more. Until the fire exercise. The simulation used real explosives with reduced lethality. The cadets were split into 2 teams and placed in an urban mock-up riddled with traps, blind corners, and randomized drone behavior. It was standard procedure for stress conditioning. But this time, the drones didn't act according to programming. Cade stood at the control tower, watching the feed. Inside the dome, the team formations were falling apart. Solis was too aggressive again, charging ahead while his rear flank collapsed. Harvin lost contact with his comlink. Then a scream cut through the channel, short, gurgled, and real. One of the drones wasn't running on stun protocols. Its targeting system was live. Flesh and blood live. Cade triggered the kill switch. Nothing happened. He slammed the override. Still nothing. In the simulation chamber, chaos erupted. Smoke bloomed from a corner corridor. A second drone activated, targeting anything that moved. Another cadet went down hard, body convulsing as a bolt seared through his vest. Then something blurred past the camera. Cade leaned forward. It was her. Canna dropped from the overhead scaffold like liquid shadow. No rifle. No HUD display. Just motion, smooth, flawless, impossible. She slid beneath the drone's fire path, jammed a blade into its undercarriage, and twisted. Sparks exploded. The drone went dark. The second drone pivoted. She was already gone. Cade toggled the external cams, cycling for movement. She reappeared on the far side of the map, sprinting across open ground. The drone sensors didn't register her until she was already on it. She vaulted up its flank, used its own armature for leverage, and jammed a short blade between its central nodes. Its core detonated, and she rode it down, landing hard but controlled. The smoke settled. She didn't look around for praise or concern. She just stood, breathing shallowly, blood on her sleeve from one of the cadets she'd pulled out of the way. When Solis stumbled into the clearing, weapon drawn, she didn't flinch. She looked at him once, then walked past without a word. Cade issued an emergency lockdown. Med teams swept in. 2 cadets were injured. 1 would require cybernetic repair. Solis remained standing, but his hands trembled at his sides. Later that evening, Colonel Reddick summoned Cade to the upper command spire. He stood with his back to the observation window, overlooking the plains where distant volcanic bursts flared red along the horizon. "She didn't hesitate," Cade said. "No," Reddick replied. "She never did. I lost override control. Those drones were hijacked. You think she triggered it to test herself?" Reddick turned, tired eyes scanning Cade's face. "No. She wouldn't do that. But she might have known someone else would." "You think this was sabotage?" "I think someone out there remembers what she is. And they are afraid she's back." Cade thought about the look on her face after the fight, cold, precise, devoid of adrenaline or panic. She hadn't killed because she was desperate. She'd dismantled the drones because it was routine. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. "Nothing. For now. Watch. Listen. See who starts asking questions." "What about the recruits?" "They're smart enough to be scared now. Let it settle." Cade paused at the door. "You still think she's here on her own?" "No," Reddick said. "She's waiting for something. Or someone," Cade thought. He found Mirex Solis alone on the upper walkway later that night, looking out over the empty field. "You think she would have let us die if we hadn't mocked her?" Solis asked. "She doesn't think like you," Cade said. "You think in wins and losses. She thinks in outcomes." "She didn't hesitate." "No. And you should stop underestimating people who don't talk." Solis didn't answer. The night passed in silence. In the restricted zone beyond the outer sensor wall, a small drone hovered in place, burned, half-functioning, its AI core missing. The air was charged with static. 50 kilometers from the base, something else moved beneath the crust of Dravos 7, alive, pulsing, foreign. Canna sat alone in the infirmary, arm bandaged, eyes closed. Outside, Cade stood watching through the glass. He still didn't know what she was. But he was starting to understand what the mark truly meant. The fog rolled in at dawn, thick and heavy with static discharge, veiling the outpost in a ghostly shroud. Surveillance nodes buzzed erratically, their feeds flickering with digital snow. Cade stood on the north perimeter, eyes narrowed against the haze, his breath clouding in the chill. He hated mornings like this, quiet, too quiet. They reminded him of places he'd survived and the men who hadn't. Dravos 7 didn't get fog. Not naturally. This wasn't weather. It was interference. A warning. He turned back toward the compound as the alert nodes reset themselves with a soft mechanical whine. No breach, no movement logged. But something in his gut twisted. A tension that hadn't left since the simulation had gone rogue 2 days earlier. In the mess hall, Mirex Solis sat hunched over a tray of untouched rations, one boot propped up against the bench leg, fingers tapping out a restless rhythm on the metal table. Across from him, Harvin watched in silence, chewing slowly, eyes darting occasionally toward the far end of the room. Canna sat alone there, back straight, shoulders relaxed, eating with slow precision. "You think she knows?" Harvin asked quietly. Solis didn't answer at first. His fingers stopped drumming. She knew the drone would go live. She moved like it was practice. Not reaction. "You think she's military?" "Not military. Not standard, anyway." Solis leaned forward. "I ran another sweep last night. Used a backdoor through the drone diagnostics. Someone accessed our simulation node remotely 3 minutes before the breach. Masked ID, but the packet trail traces to a ghost server last used during the Umbra Purge." Harvin sat back, eyes wide. "That up wasn't a training story, was it?" "No," Solis said. "It was a massacre. Supposedly carried out by human assets that never existed." "Like her?" Solis nodded. "She doesn't want attention. She wants observation. But I don't think she's just watching us. I think she's watching for something else." Like what? I don't know. But I intend to find out. That afternoon, the recruits were rotated into patrol drills along the outer ridgelines. Cade oversaw the loadout personally, checking each weapon, every suit calibration. He ignored complaints, sarcasm, and every smart remark from half-alert cadets. He was searching, not for mistakes in gear, but in posture, in tone, in eyes that shifted a little too often toward Kanna, or away from her. What he saw unsettled him. Fear had settled into the group. Not fear of war, or pain, or failure. It was her. She had become something more than a rumor. A symbol. And symbols were dangerous. They invited obsession. And fear. As the patrols broke off, Cade followed Kanna's group across the shale rise into the northern stretch, out where the sensors had glitched that morning. He kept his distance, moving from ridge to ridge, watching how she moved. She was too careful. Not cautious, but calculating. Even in casual drills, her eyes scanned for irregularities. Her stride adjusted for unseen terrain. Her left hand hovered near her utility pouch, where she kept no visible weapon. Then she stopped. Cade froze behind a jagged outcrop. Kanna turned slowly, staring straight at him through the haze. She didn't call out. Didn't raise an alarm. She simply stared, long enough to acknowledge him, then turned and rejoined the patrol without a word. Later, back in the command dome, Cade reviewed the feed again. The footage from her body cam had gaps. Millisecond intervals of distortion. The kind that only happened when someone modified recording behavior. No recruit should have had that clearance. He ran the timestamps against the others. During every gap in her footage, one of the perimeter sensors also dropped out. She was masking her presence. But not all the time. Only during specific windows. He pushed back from the console, rubbing the back of his neck. The pieces didn't just suggest training. They suggested surveillance. But she wasn't spying on the recruits. She was tracking the perimeter. She wasn't a threat. She was a warning. The device was heavy, an ignition core, high frequency, unstable. Meant for catastrophic demolition. Cade didn't need instruction. He'd used one before, on a rogue AI spire during the Europa collapse. It had taken 20 square kilometers off the map. How deep is the vault? Not deep enough. Cade holstered a repeater rifle and scanned the interface on his wrist. His team was still trying to hold the command deck. Solis and Haven were holding one of the comm towers, last seen dragging wounded recruits into the auxiliary bunkers. Get them out, he said. I'll handle the vault. No, Kanna replied. We both will. Outside, the world cracked open. A beam of sickly violet light erupted from the earth just beyond the training field. It lanced into the sky, splitting clouds as the ground around it liquefied. From the breach, a construct emerged, part flesh, part alloy, pulsing with cognition not entirely machine. It moved with a deliberate grace, ignoring weapon fire from surrounding defense turrets. Their rounds simply passed through it, absorbed or redirected. Cade and Kanna sprinted across the fractured compound, using the broken terrain for cover. Ahead, Haven staggered from the bunker with blood on his face, dragging a recruit by the collar. Solis fired from the entryway, his rifle overheating. Cade ducked beside them, slamming a new charge into his repeater. Fall back to Sector 6. This isn't salvageable. What is that thing? Haven shouted. Not your concern anymore, Kanna said, voice firm. You evac priority now. Solis glanced at her, then at Cade. She's in charge now? She always was, Cade answered. They moved fast, cutting across the burning yard, sprinting under collapsing scaffolds. Above them, the construct moved slowly but relentlessly, like it had all the time in the world. The few remaining drones that tried to engage it were plucked apart midair, their pieces suspended by an invisible field before being crushed into slag. Kanna broke off from the others as they neared the vault again. She didn't look back. Cade followed, descending into the lower levels, the heat rising with each step. Expecting something to come through. In the barracks, Solis scrolled through decrypted data until his eyes burned. Lines of recovered telemetry from the broken drone danced across the display. Something about the signal pattern didn't sit right. He ran it through 3 analyzers before the result came up. Not rogue human tech. Not Arctic. Something else. He leaned in. The data fragment carried a foreign code structure, one known only to classified off-world skirmishes from 2 years prior, deep beyond the official exploration zone. A zone where an experimental intelligence hive had been encountered and supposedly destroyed. He saved the result under a locked tag and powered down the console. The air in the room felt heavier. He turned to Harvin, who was half asleep in the corner. We're not just training. We're bait. The next day, during routine drone cleaning, a technician was found unconscious in Bay 3. No signs of injury. No signs of struggle. But his neural interface chip had been wiped. Factory reset. The medtechs couldn't explain it. Cade reviewed the logs. The last person authorized in the bay was Canna. He brought her in without ceremony. They sat across from one another in a sealed interview room, bare walls, one table, one camera that Cade had already disabled. She didn't look tired. Didn't look concerned. You were in Bay 3 yesterday. Yes. You accessed the drone archive? No. You were recorded leaving the room seconds before a neural breach occurred. I didn't touch him. I didn't say he was touched. She watched him for a long moment, then finally spoke again. If someone wanted to test your defenses quietly, they'd use a drone. If someone wanted to test your reaction, they'd make it look like a glitch. But if they wanted to see if you're paying attention, they'd make you think it was sabotage. Is that what's happening? She didn't answer. Cade leaned forward. You're not a recruit. Not really. You've been observing more than you've been learning. I've already learned everything this program can offer. Then why are you still here? Because something is coming. And most of you won't see it until it's inside the wire. She stood without permission. He didn't stop her. She paused at the door. I'm not the threat you need to worry about. That night, an alert blared across the upper spire. One of the outer patrols failed to check in. Cade launched a recon skiff and followed the last signal pulse out past the glacier shelf. The team had vanished without trace. No debris, no comm chatter. Only a hollow echo in the canyon sensors. He returned to find Colonel Reddick already reviewing satellite traces. She knew, Cade said, dropping his helmet on the table. Yes. You knew she knew. I suspected. You're going to have to explain why we're sitting on this powder keg without backup. Reddick looked up from the display. Because the Black Vipers were meant to be forgotten. But something out there remembers. Is it Arctic? No. Then what is it? Reddick tapped a projection. The image showed a metallic shape, half buried in ice, with tendrils of black fiber crawling from its hull. Not technology they recognized. Not human. Not Arctic. It was watching. It had been for some time. This isn't just a war test, Reddick said. This is a reclamation zone. And the enemy isn't invading. They're retrieving something. Huh? Reddick didn't answer. Cade left the command room and found Canna outside, sitting on the edge of the old bunker wall, eyes fixed on the southern sky. He sat beside her without speaking. She didn't look at him. They're already inside the base, she said finally. He didn't doubt her. She turned her head slightly. I need access to the vault. No one touches the vault. Then you're going to lose this place. He hesitated, then stood. She followed. They walked into the dark together. And in the deep soil beneath the outpost, something opened its eyes. The emergency sirens wailed across Dravos, 7 like dying wolves, their cry swallowed by the growing tremor beneath the earth. Inside the command dome, red lights pulsed across consoles as seismic readings spiked and external sensors flatlined in quick succession. Cade stood at the center of the control deck, jaw tight, watching as the holographic display of the base flickered, corrupted by feedback from something deeper than any known tectonic fault. He knew this wasn't natural. Canna had told him the truth, piecemeal, veiled in caution, but he should have acted sooner. Now the ground beneath them moved with purpose, not pressure. Something ancient had awoken, and they were directly above it. Lock the outer gates, he barked to the techs. Seal the drone bays. Pull every cadet off the field and reroute them to emergency shelters. "Sir, we've lost contact with Shelter 2, a corporal called back. No life signs. All feeds cut simultaneously." He didn't hesitate. "Then don't send them there." On the west ridge, black smoke curled upward from the charred husk of Watchpost Gamma. Its structure had crumpled inward, as if something had pressed up from underneath and simply folded the outpost in half. No explosion. No heat signatures. Just implosion, precise and deliberate. Cade took the lift down 3 levels, entering the army without authorization clearance. He keyed the override for the vault. The retinal scanner hesitated, then blinked green. Inside, rows of experimental weapons gleamed beneath cold lights, tools designed not for war, but for annihilation. She was already there. Canna stood at the far end of the vault, outfitted in a full stealth combat exosuit black as obsidian, the coiled Viper insignia now prominent on her shoulder. The change in her was subtle but unmistakable. The passive silence she wore as a recruit had shed like dead skin. Now, she radiated command. Not bravado, not flair, just certainty. "You waited too long," she said without turning. "I wanted to believe it could be handled without you." "It couldn't." She holstered a plasma shiv and turned toward him. Her face was calm, but her eyes burned with urgency. "They've burrowed under the base," she continued. "It's a retrieval unit, biosynthetic intelligence. We left it buried here after the Umbra Purge. They've come to reclaim it. But they won't stop there. How do we kill it?" "We don't." She stepped closer, handing him a device. "We deny it what it came for.